This podcast is part of the It Was a Thing on TV podcast network.
An anthology on the bad, the short-lived, and the forgotten shows and events in television history. You are listening to It Was a Thing on TV.
No, that's it. I'm not modeling anymore for the two of you. Well, I guess I just had my first taste of the filthy side of this business. Need I remind you, sirs, I am a male model, not a male prostitute.
Episode number 609, submission number 1812. Strike It Rich. Strike It Rich, and we're talking about the 1986 to 1987 version, aired in syndication from September 15th of 1986 through the following fall in 1987.
Soak away the cares of your day as you relax in your own portable spa, or live the life of luxury. Spend a weekend breezing down the boulevards in an elegant Rolls-Royce. And sunny days and starry nights await you as you jet across the Atlantic to the tropical paradise of St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands. Welcome to the fastest high-stakes game on television, the all-new Strike It Rich. And here's your host, Joe Garagiola.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome to Strike It Rich.
In case you weren't paying attention to our social media, last Thursday, the 12th of February, somebody, not going to say who, could be me, posted a lot of pictures of Strike It Rich, and there's a reason for it. Well, one, we did talk about Teresa Ring on the previous episode, Get a Life Revisited, but really, the reason for posting all the pictures is because the one and only Joe Garagiola would have turned 100 on February the 12th. Joe Garagiola, the famous baseball player, commentator, game show host, and he hosted Strike It Rich, but he also hosted a couple of other shows, To Tell the Truth in its final season in the 70s. And also he did Today, I don't want to say seemingly forever, but he did that for some time. So that was our little tribute, and when I say our tribute, my tribute, to Joe Garagiola, sharing these pictures from Strike It Rich. And now we're going to cover the show. Just for clarification, this version of Strike It Rich has no connections to the other versions of Strike It Rich in terms of gameplay, in terms of ownership. The name was used with permission from the actual ownership, the wife, I do believe, of whomever had created the original Strike It Rich in the 1950s. But again, the game has no similarities to anything Strike It Rich in the past. So in 1986, you have this sort of new kid on the block in Kline and Friends. They're basically a lot of people who came over from the Barry and Enright group after Jack Barry passed away. And after Tic-Tac-Toe had died off. And after The Joker's Wild had died off. Well, they didn't die until 86. And they did have a show, Break the Bank, which we covered previously, in 1985 and 86. So they brought Strike It Rich aboard, which in contrast to Break the Bank, was a trivia game. Not saying that Break the Bank wasn't trivia, but there were like simple questions, and you sort of had like a password plus type of puzzle. Not really brain bending, but also at the same time, truth be told, this isn't really brain bending either. The idea was two couples, they had to move across an archway to get to an end goal. And then once they got to the end goal, they had to answer one more question to officially win the game. And the way they did that is they were given a category and there were 5 answers shown on the board, which answered questions regarding that category. And they had to say how many questions they'd answer correctly. 1, 2, or 3. And for each correct answer, they could go 1 space across the archway for each correct answer. And they weren't obligated to do that. If they felt the bad guy was behind the screen, they could stop. So there's a little bit of intuition involved. We'll talk about the bad guy in a little bit, because I know at least one person here can't wait to talk about the baddie. So this archway, it had, I want to say, 8 monitors. Maybe it was 10 monitors. It was an even number of monitors. And people had to go from one end to the other, answering these questions in a certain category. They'd be given the category and the 5 answers, and they'd have to match up which answer goes with whatever statement was given. Once they played their turn, if they didn't hit the bad guy, the bandit, we'll say it's the bandit. We're going to talk more about the bandit in a little bit. If they didn't hit the bandit, they could keep control. A wrong answer, control went to the other team, and also hitting the bandit made them lose control of play. Whoever got to the end of the arch and answered that final question, which wasn't multiple choice, wasn't one of those like the rest of the game, it was open-ended, a little bit tougher. If they got that question right, they won the game, they won all their prizes, and they got to go play in the bonus round. And the bonus round was just, for lack of a better phrase, stank-ass luck. Each person on the winning team, husband and wife, these are couples who are playing on the show. It could have been boyfriend, girlfriend, but still, there are 2 people on each team for the show. One took the upper arch, one took the bottom arch, and they would predict which one had a Strike It Rich logo, trying to avoid the bandit. If they made 2 mistakes, they would generally win $5,000. But if they only made 1 mistake, and that's 1 mistake out of 7 random possibilities, they could win $5,000 in cash and a car. And actually, if you took a look at some of the photos that I posted earlier, there's one with a car, and it looks like it's some sort of old Rolls Royce. From the episodes I saw, they didn't offer any sort of luxury cars. It was more mainstream, maybe because the powers that be at Kline and Friends said, hey, we can't be offering these $20,000 or $30,000 Rolls Royces because it's, excuse the phrase, it's breaking the bank. But they went to more traditional, okay, here's a $8,000 car, $10,000 car, what have you. Not a luxury car by any means. So each dollar sign that was shown, each one of those logos, the Strike It Rich logo, each one of those dollar signs, that Strike It Rich logo, was worth $100. But again, if they made it to the end, if they committed to finding 5 out of 7 dollar signs, they'd win $5,000. If they committed to 6 out of 7, they would win $5,000 and the vehicle. But also, every step along the way of the arch in the main game, there was a prize attached to it, if it wasn't a bandit. And the prizes were a little, let's say, out there. It wasn't like your traditional refrigerator. You'd have like spa days. I mean, that'd be a little more popular nowadays. And then different events. There was like being a DJ for a day with Rick Dees. That'd be a good prize. Being a DJ with Rick Dees for a day. You could just pepper him with questions about Disco Duck. Primarily one question. Why? But again, they had these different prizes. It wasn't just trips. It wasn't just furniture. It wasn't just appliances. They had different experiences. Different, really kind of cool experiences from what I've seen. Whomever won the episode stayed on or was the champion on the next episode, and they played until they were properly defeated, but also there was the $75,000 winning cap because it did air on the New York City flagship CBS station, WCBS. So you did have that come into play because that was like one of the things with Joker's Wild. You couldn't go over $50,000 because that was the cap that CBS had at that time. So we have the same thing going on here where you're done at 75. And truth be told, I don't even know if anybody got anywhere near $75,000 because this did not air in Cleveland. And I've got a theory as to why it didn't air in Cleveland. But we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Oh, I got the theory, Mike.
I'm listening.
It sucked.
Beyond that, I do have Another theory related to it sucked, but not this because, again, it didn't air in Cleveland. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Believe it or not, this show actually was a much bigger hit overseas. This aired in the UK with Michael Barrymore for years. And actually was played with three couples doing the same game. And if you've ever seen that, they love talking on their British TV shows to contestants because I've seen episodes where the contestant introductions and interviews lasted like 15 minutes. And I think the show would have had a 45-minute or hour-long time slot, but still, a quarter of your show is dedicated to let's interview the contestants, let's talk about them, let's talk about what they do and whatnot. But still, did air from 1986 to 1994, took a brief respite, but then returned from 1996 to 1999. So you're talking about 11 years there. So it had a healthy run. So whether it was the comedy of Michael Barrymore, their interviewing, the game didn't change all that much. Like I said, they had three couples versus two couples, but somehow that magic translated overseas, I'm guessing through comedy. With all due respect to Joe Garagiola, I don't really relate to him as a comic host. There are some other personnel that we need to talk about who are on this show. First, we got to talk about the announcer, Bob Hilton. He's done everything, it seems, over the last 50 years. He hosted Truth or Consequences after Bob Barker. He did announcing on so many shows, blockbusters. I'm sure he did Pyramid at some point because it seemed like everybody at some point announced on Pyramid in the 80s. But he's still with us. He's, I think, only 83 or 84. He's not all that old. Well, in a relative sense for somebody who's been in the business for half a century. And actually, Wiki says he'll turn 83 on July 23rd. Going through some of the shows that he announced. Win, Lose, or Draw. We talked about Pyramid. We talked about Blockbusters. Double Talk. How could we forget about Double Talk? Trivia Trap. Child's Play. Card Sharks. Because I think he did Card Sharks back in the 80s for a while, I do believe. I don't remember him on the Jim Perry version. But regardless, he's been doing TV for a very long time and still successful to this day. In terms of the personnel, the prize model, we talked about her last week. We said we're going to talk about this person for 2 consecutive episodes, but there's no chance in heck it's going to be 3 because I don't even know if she necessarily has a third entry for her IMDb. Probably does. Teresa Ring. And I wish I knew the exact verbiage that one of us used. Here you go. But I shared a picture with these guys, maybe about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, since we were talking about Teresa Ring in Get a Life Revisited. And let's say young Chico was just a little smitten with her.
I'm not going to lie. I had a girl crush on her.
Like I said, he was just a little smitten with her.
She was a cutie patootie.
She really was. I mean, she's had the 80s hair. She has a beautiful smile. A gorgeous lady. But really, again, she didn't do much after this. She didn't do much before this. I mean, she did, like I said, Get a Life. And I can't think of another show that she would have done. Not to say that there were no other shows that she could have done, but none are coming to mind. Those are the 3 people involved with the show in terms of in front of the camera, in terms of announcing, modeling, whatnot. We got to talk about the Bandit. Now, first off, as you probably saw if you followed our social media, when we posted all these pictures from Strike It Rich, one hashtag that we wish was around back in 1986, 87, we would make this fetch, even though really fetch would never happen. Hashtag no bandit, no bandit. Greg, how did that even come about? Was that a you thing?
Yeah, because they say no bandit a lot. And I'm like, is this their attempt to make big bucks, no whammies, their own thing, their own version of it?
That's a good point. Having some sort of catchphrase, yeah, that's something that you sort of want to get placed in people's heads. Sounds kind of weird, but also at the same time, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure if Strike It Rich was around in 2026, 40 years later, somebody somewhere would be like, hashtag no bandit, no bandit. Because I'm sure that for Press Your Luck, I'm sure they do hashtag no whammies or hashtag big bucks or hashtag big bucks no whammies. But the bandit himself, there actually was a voice, and a well-known voice, who was the voice of the bandit. And this is great. I know I love this fact, and I know Greg loves this fact. The voice of the bandit, legendary baseball player, specifically for the Baltimore Orioles, but also the Cleveland Indians, among other teams, Boog Powell. Never thought we'd get a Boog Powell reference on this podcast. Making a connection to stuff we've talked about in the past, it does sort of sound like a villain you'd hear in a video game, especially a video game around 1986, 87. Something that may have been on like early NES. Maybe it was something, I don't even know if you'd have the technological capabilities to do it on the Atari 2600 at that point or the Atari 7800. But yeah, it just comes across as sort of video game-ish. Not even necessarily home video games. Arcade games. Greg, would you like me to tell the home audience what an arcade game is? No, never mind.
No, that'll be in the next episode. I'll have you explain things.
I might have to do it 3 times that episode. Go figure. But anyhow, that's what that sort of cackle reminds me of. It reminds me of the baddie in a video game. And I don't know if that's necessarily what they were going for, but that's what they got from Boog Powell. And in case you don't know who Boog Powell is, as I said, legendary Baltimore Orioles player. He played a little while for the Cleveland Indians back in the mid-70s. He owns some sort of restaurant at Camden Yards. I do want to say, given it's Baltimore, that it is seafood related in some capacity, like a crab hut or something like that.
I think it's a barbecue.
It could be a barbecue. I know that Baltimore is big for its seafood, but also when I think of other ballparks where they have some sort of restaurant named for or owned by a former player, specifically thinking about San Diego, which had one owned by Randy Jones, who just passed away not that long ago. I know that was a barbecue. We don't have one here in Cleveland, even though I'd love to see like Carlos Baerga's steamed hams or something like that. Who doesn't want a steamed ham from Carlos Baerga, even though Carlos Baerga and steamed hams have no relationship to each other? But still, it's in that...
Hold on, Mike.
What?
Hold on, Mike. How do you know Carlos Baerga has never been to Albany, New York?
Well, I don't know him that well, even though I've seen him numerous times over the last couple of years. Maybe I should ask him next time I see him, hey, Carlos, have you ever been to Albany or Utica? Have you ever been to upstate New York and gotten a steamed ham? Yeah, I'm sure that would fly over well with him. It isn't, hey, you hit home runs from each side of the plate in one inning, like the only person ever to do that in Major League history. No, let's not talk about that. Have you ever been to Albany? I'm sure he had to be at Albany at some point because possibly when he was playing Double-A ball, I'm sure they went to Albany Colony at some point.
Now, hold on, Mike. I would ask Carlos Baerga, when you were with the Mets, did John Allrood ever forget his batting helmet whenever he went out on the field?
Did that really happen? I'm asking because...
No, I'm joking. That's a joke.
Okay, well, the thing is, for the people who are listening who don't know all that much about John Allrood, he actually had to wear a batting helmet running the bases because if he took a baseball to the noggin, that wasn't going to end well. So no, it's a legitimate question. I'm sure that Carlos Baerga would probably tell me, get out of here. Here's your autograph. Get the hell out of the way, kid. So I mentioned earlier that this didn't air in Cleveland, and I said I had a theory, and this is a good theory, and this is related to Break the Bank that we talked about earlier. Break the Bank, as you guys know, it lasted 1 year. It was bad. The Gene Rayburn version, when he hosted, he looked kind of like a fish out of water. He was told to make it a serious show, and I'm sorry, Gene Rayburn doesn't make much serious, especially after Match Game. And then they brought in Joe Farrago, and the game was much lamer, no celebrities, and just picking cards off the board and whatnot. I saw the ratings for Break the Bank here in Cleveland. They were absolutely horrible. It used to air at 4 p.m. on weekdays, at least until early 1986. Then they actually moved it to 9:30 in the morning. So before Pyramid, because I think they aired Pyramid at that point. But they just like totally moved it from a decent time slot following the CBS soaps and before Divorce Court. They had a nice little Blair Entertainment block there. And they moved it to 9:30. The ratings, from what I remember, were it had below a 1 in terms of ratings. And this is in the era where, yes, cable was getting more popular, but still, not everybody's on board with cable. So they were like, not even joking, it was like out of, I think Cleveland had 7 stations at that time. PBS, I don't think, was metered. I don't think PBS is still metered nowadays. But you had CBS, ABC, NBC, then you had at least 2 independent stations. Actually 3, because you would have had Channel 19 here at that time. And then you had 23 in Akron, which would have been ABC. It finished consistently like in 7th place or 6th place. I think that's the reason Strike It Rich didn't air in Cleveland. Everybody in this area who ran TV stations like, nope, those bad ratings from Break the Bank, we're not even taking a chance. Pass. So I think that's why it didn't air here. The damage that Break the Bank did. But also at the same time, Kline and Friends did come back the next year, 1987, with Win, Lose, or Draw. Now, admittedly, that had Burt Reynolds' name attached to it. But that was the big thing, at least when I remember, in syndication back in 1987. That was the big game. I don't think you had many new games in syndication back in 87. You had High Rollers. That was big for a while, but that got shuffled off to like 2 or 3 in the morning by like April of 88. Or maybe even earlier than that. This was a big, don't want to use a pun here, but this is a big strike for Kline and Friends. And I don't even want to get into the music because that music is absolutely annoying. But one thing I do have, since we talked about the photos earlier, I actually have, and you know, if Chico wanted to use this for the logo, he could. I've got all sorts of Strike It Rich stuff. I've got logos, and you saw the slides and whatnot. I could actually do all my promotions if I wanted to make my own little fake advertisement for Strike It Rich. Maybe I will. I can actually do this. Boy, that would be really funny if I sort of conjured that up. But in addition to all that, the slides and the photos and the logos, I actually do have press releases. Biography of Richard Kline. I'm sure there's a biography of Joe Garagiola here.
Where's the biography of Boog Powell?
Well, hold on. Let me see what I have here, okay? Okay, there's an introductory paper here. Oh, okay, here we go. A press release for the premiere, Joe Garagiola biography, story ideas and news hooks regarding Strike It Rich Q&A with Joe Garagiola and Richard Kline biography, and then 4 35mm slides from the show, the logo, 5 black and white 8x10 glossy photographs, which I don't think I have 5. I thought I only had 3 of them. Maybe they're including like these logos and whatnot. 1 black and white Strike It Rich logo sheet and 2 pages of 85 line ad slicks. Okay, that's what these two are. Okay, I don't think I have 5 photos, but regardless. Okay, so there is no biography of Boog Powell here or Teresa Ring. I'm sorry, Greg. And then there's directions about on-air promotion, generic promotions, build your own spots, personalized promos, postcard promos, print advertising, publicity, where to contact, Kline and Friends if you want audience information or contestant information. So there's all sorts of interesting stuff here. Let me just go through like the pertinent stuff here. I'm not going to go through Joe Garagiola's biography because I already gave you a pretty good biography of him. This, I do believe, is for the premiere. It says, Strike It Rich, one of television's newest game shows to debut on, and then you put your channel there. So we'll just say channel 69, W, it was a thing on TV. Haha. That's going to be the new name of our channel. It wasn't just a network. Now it's a channel. It has its own call letters and stuff. An old name, but a new game, Strike It Rich will make its television debut this fall on Channel 69 W. It was a thing on TV on whatever date and whatever time it airs. I mean, given it's our channel, we'll air it probably like 24 hours a day. We'll just like rerun the same episode 48 times every day until the new episode comes out. This new daily game show features a combination of challenging questions, an understandable and fundamental format, valuable and offbeat prizes, an agreeable balance of skill and luck, and a charismatic host. Strike It Rich features Joe Garagiola, one of America's warmest and most popular broadcast personalities, and an appealing, state-of-the-art set that is similar to a life-size game board. The contestant couples actually act as their own markers as they make their way across one of the 2 arches that extend from one end of the set to the other. There are 10 stops along the way, each with a video screen that reveals either a prize or the dreaded bandit. Upon correctly answering their questions, second page, a couple is permitted to press a button activating the video screen. Until the bandit appears on the screen, the couples have the option of either continuing along the board, trying to accumulate additional prizes, or banking their winnings and turning control over to the opposing couple. Once a couple banks its winnings, those prizes cannot be forfeited. When a couple elects to continue, only the last prize won is put up for risk and can be forfeited, along with the couple's turn if the bandit appears on the screen. Prizes on Strike It Rich are the ultimate in fantasy gifts, including the use of a Rolls Royce for a weekend, exciting treasure hunts, a glamorous yacht party, and even an opportunity to be a policeman for a day. Boy, that's not something that would go over in 2026. Contestants can win up to $30,000 worth of prizes. Strike It Rich is produced by Kline and Friends in association with Blair Entertainment. So there is your press release for the debut of Strike It Rich. And let me just see if there's anything else interesting here in this other paperwork. I bought this back in 2020, and really I've never looked at the paperwork. So this is the first time in 6 years I'm actually seeing what is involved here. I got the slides, I got the photos, I scanned them all in. I'm a happy Mikey. The Strike It Rich Q&A with Joe Garagiola and Richard Kline. I'm not going to go through all of it because this is probably about 6 pages long, but I just want to go through some of the highlights here. Oh, these are like question stems, and they actually have the answers like on a separate sheet. So I'm guessing it's like if you have your Hollywood entertainment reporter and they're sort of like doing an interview, but it's like not really an interview because one person is being recorded in whatever city you're in, and the audio or video from Joe Garagiola or Richard Kline is coming from Los Angeles, something like that. Joe Garagiola, why do you wear a tuxedo?
That's the question. What makes you wear a tuxedo?
Why do you wear a tuxedo? Yes. And I think I have the answer to that on the other sheet, so I'll share that with you. I just want to see what other questions there are about him. Who's your favorite athlete? Favorite movies? Favorite music? And then Richard Kline. I'm not going to go over his questions and look at his answers because who gives a you-know-what about him. Out of all the game shows that will premiere this season, why do you think this one will succeed? Okay, I think we need to actually look at that question. Okay, so about the tuxedo. Why do you wear a tuxedo, Joe Garagiola? For me as a host, I like the tuxedo so I don't have to keep running in here and changing my uniforms all the time. That's the practical standpoint. But I also think it gives the show a touch of class. It says to our contestants, hey, you're somebody special, and this is a special kind of show. If you only knew. Anyhow, I don't look at the tuxedo as being that formal. Once the show gets going, people will just think, that's how he dresses. So that's why he wears a tuxedo. I'm sure that just like is absolutely fascinating to you. Okay, so the last question about Strike It Rich to Richard Kline. Out of all the game shows that will premiere this season, why do you think this one will succeed? I've been doing game shows since 1972. I've done somewhere between 25 and 30 series and pilots, and I have never been involved with a show that I think can be as successful as Strike It Rich. It has all of the classical game show elements. We spent a year and a half developing this show. We paid a lot of attention to the question form, and the show has one of the best question forms I've ever seen. It allows the audience to see all the answers on the screen and play along. This is a wonderful element. Also, this show handles prizes differently. We don't offer hard merchandise, but rather emotionally involved prizes. We're not selling a sailboat. We're selling the adventure of a sailing weekend. We're not selling food for a year. We're selling romance, mystery, all the emotional things.
Oh, fuck off with this shit.
I'm not even done yet, but I love that. Let me continue so you can form your opinion even more. We have fun with our prizes. I think people will look at these things and realize they have never seen things like this on a show. The prizes offer much more emotional involvement than on other shows. This is an affluent country. How many refrigerators can you give away? We showed Strike It Rich to everyday game show viewers. There are people who are your next door neighbors who always have game shows on. As such, they are people who felt they know what they liked and didn't like in game shows. They like Strike It Rich. The majority liked it very, very much. This is starting to sound like President Mr. Black type of stuff. I got so many fans. They love Strike It Rich. Everybody loves Strike It Rich. Anyhow, the reason why Strike It Rich will be successful is not because of the professionals, but because we've shown it to people who love game shows and they think Strike It Rich is great. Joke's on you, Richard Kline. Ha 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 ha. Okay, so this last thing, story ideas and news hooks regarding Strike It Rich. Separate or combined, here are several feature story ideas that local talk show producers and hosts, newspaper columnists, and magazine editors may want to explore regarding America's next big game show hit. The host with the most. One of America's most popular personalities, Joe Garagiola, talks about his special approach as a host. I'm not even going to get into that. Number 2, Garagiolisms. Close and at his best. In addition to his duties as host of Strike It Rich, Garagiola is one of the nation's best loved personalities. Share some of the experiences that brought him to Strike It Rich and an unlimited quantity of quotable anecdotes that make him a great feature subject. Man, the BS is like really backing up here. The All-American Game Garagiola style. An old name but an entirely new game. Explore the offbeat prizes on Strike It Rich. The people behind the flash and the cash. That's even what it says. The people behind the flash and cash. Contestants finding the right stuff. How to be the best contestant you can be. How to succeed in producing a successful game show. How has high technology influenced game shows? Okay, so there's some of your possible story arcs if you're doing any sort of news piece, article, video on Strike It Rich.
Did you just mention story arcs?
Well, that's what this all was story ideas and news hooks regarding Strike It Rich. So maybe story arc might not necessarily be the right term per se. But again, we're talking about story ideas for pieces, for articles about Strike It Rich.
Yeah. Story arcs for a game show with arcs.
Oh, I see what you did there. Not bad at this hour of night. Very good. So what else can we say about Strike It Rich? I don't know if you guys have anything to add. Oh, I do have one more thing to add before we go. About Boog Powell. Go look him up on like 1976 Topps trading cards. 75, 76, 77. He looks like a giant blood clot wearing those red Cleveland Indians uniforms back in the day.
Well, Mike, I got something for you.
Oh.
We're going to play a game of non-eBay prices right. Oh, man, I missed this. Well, I don't think we played the Sexy Sacks in a while, but God, I love it. Okay. So, guys, you are going to be pitting on this signed Boog Powell American League Baseball. And if you look right here, guys, look right here. It says official ball, American League, Gene Buddick. And there's Boog Powell's signature. Look at that.
Gene Budig, that goes back. Wow. As Greg said, this is non-eBay prices right, but this is not on an auction site or anything like that. This is actually an item Greg has holding in his hands. So he actually spent hard-earned American cash on this ball. Whether it's because of this episode or not, I don't know, and I don't necessarily want to know, but this is actually something Greg spent hard-earned money on.
I imagine that this is a popular prize on Strike It Rich, your very own autographed baseball.
Now, I got this last fall at a baseball card show at Hofstra University. And then in the spring, I got this JSA certified. So what you are going to be bidding on is the combined price of the baseball and the certification for the ball.
Now, did you get this signed at that time, or is this just you bought the ball and you took it to the show and PSA certified it?
Yes, I bought the ball at the fall show at Hofstra, and then the spring show earlier this year, I brought it back to get it certified by JSA.
Okay, so you've never seen Boog Powell sign this. Okay, that's the big thing I wanted to clarify. Okay.
Yes. All right. So, Mike, I'm going to start the bidding with you.
I wish you didn't, because I don't know how much Chico knows about how much the balls cost and how much the PSA certification costs. So I was hoping he'd throw out some number and I'd just come in and swipe it, because I probably know a lot more about it than him. Okay.
That's why I went with you first.
Oh, you asshole. Okay. How about just doing some math in my head? See, the problem is I don't know how much PSA costs to certify stuff, especially stuff that wasn't signed on the premises. I will say $55.
Chico.
I don't know much about PSA certification, but I do know you. And I know that you don't like money, Greg. I'm going to go $56.
Yeah, there's your $1 right there.
Guys, you have both overbid.
Hallelujah. Okay.
Mike, under $55.
You know what? I'll go $45.
Chico?
$1.
No, I don't think you're going to win this one, and I'll tell you why. Because the ball itself, unsigned, is $20, and the autograph, I'm thinking the ball might be like $30 or so, maybe $25. I think there's a little bit more.
It's not going to be $35 because we already established that $55 is over.
Guys,
No. Oh, okay,
guys,
hold on.
Guys.
Girls.
I got something to play. Ding, 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 ding. The price of the ball.
It's $1.
$20.
Uh-huh.
The basic COA for Brute L, $25.
I would have thought that the signature was extra.
Well, no, he says the ball with the signature on it was $20.
Oh,
But
okay.
also, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, Greg mentioned it was a Gene Budig ball, so that goes back sometime. I know baseball's back in like 1993. I know that's like Bobby Brown time, but official Major League Baseballs back then were $10. And, you know, Boog Powell signed it in the 90s before autographs got really hot. It may have been like a $5, $10 purchase. So it does make sense. And actually, that's sort of how I was breaking it down was maybe it's like 25 for the ball and 20 for the authentication, or 30 and 15, or 15 and 30. But yeah, that's how I came up with 45. So yeah, I'm sorry. When you hear the ding, ding, ding after somebody bid $1, you just got to concede at that point.
I do.
Now, hold on a second. You know, if there was ever an issue in Bobby Brown's office in the American League, if somebody had an issue, you know what he'd say?
Kiss my ass.
All right, that's what I'll do.
No. That's my prerogative.
God, I thought you were going to play the Whitney Houston line there. Kiss my ass. I seriously thought that's where you're going. But, oh, you went with a my prerogative joke. Okay, good. Hope you're proud of yourself. All right, now with that out of the way, I think we can officially put Strike It Rich to bed. What can we say about Strike It Rich? Well, they tried. Maybe they didn't try enough. Maybe they overestimated their audience. Maybe the game just sucked. Sucked the chrome off a 57 Chevy. But Strike It Rich, 40 years later, in observance of Joe Garagiola's 100th birthday, we're putting it in our archives as Just a Thing on TV. You can find us at our website, itwasathingontv.com, on Facebook at It Was a Thing on TV podcast, and elsewhere at It Was a Thing on TV. You can find us on any podcast player, and we're also on YouTube, where you can subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with our releases, including what's coming up next time. We just celebrated the 100th birthday of Joe Garagiola. Now we're going to come back next time, and we're going to celebrate the 100th birthday of somebody else. 100th birthday is happening on consecutive days. We're going to talk about one of those shows that I think for the longest time we considered untouchable, but for this 100th birthday, we had to cover it. We're going to try and do our best paying true homage to this classic TV show, which is spun off into 4 different films. Surely you know what we're talking about, but we're not talking about that one. And don't call me Shirley. Right here next time at It Was the Thing on TV. Thank you very much to Chico. Thank you very much to Greg. And thank you very much for listening. Come back here on Friday when we talk about so much hilarity.
Wow!
No bandit!
Go.
No bandit! No, no, no!
Bandit got him.